I'm going to call the meeting to order. Gino filling in for Michael Catalano, who's delivering a baby this evening. We're sending, good luck that way. Godspeed to Michael and his beautiful wife. God help them both.
Here. Ms. Crockett.
Here.
Ms. Hogue. Here. Ms. Hogarth. Ms. Cutner. Ms. Paoli.
Here.
Mr. Vecchio.
Here.
Vice President Seidel.
Here.
President Sangillo.
Here. Okay, let's rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so welcome everyone. Tonight we have, Gino, would you read out the
Public notice of this meeting pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act has been given by the Superintendent of Schools in the following manner. On January 15th, 2021, notice of this meeting was posted on the interior of the school administration offices, 1 Lincoln Avenue, Haddonfield. Written notice was submitted and filed with the Haddonfield Borough Clerk, and notices were faxed to the Courier Post and mailed to the Retrospect newspaper.
Thank you, Gino. All right, so we have changed up our format slightly. We've welcomed in a couple of members from the public and some press and some HEA. So we've got Rachel Gold is here representing the HEA, Matt Anuko from the Retrospect. We've got a public member here. Kate, you get like a standing ovation for being here. This is Kate Quick, who has 2 kids and Lizzie. And also, again, for all of us to remember, Mike and Ryan and the whole IT team that put this together, they work even during regular meetings. They're always setting up the table. Thank you. It is our work session, January 21st. We're going to run through committee reports. We switched up committees. The new committee list should be online, but the board has been made aware. So we may be not fully getting full reports yet, since we're in the work session and just switched up. Jim, you have anything for communications?
Yeah, we had a meeting on January 6th. We're still moving forward with a lot of curriculum changes and improvements, even though we have the pandemic. One of the things we've done is align the gifted and talented curriculum. So it's the same across all of the elementary schools, and we're working on the articulation from the middle school and from the elementary school to the middle school. Middle school, we approved the program of studies, also continuing to work on the gifted and talented program there. Now, Ellen Brossman, who's been a big help consulting for that, will be working again with our team of teachers there. High school, we approved that program of study. We do have the new college math class that's going to be there. So that is on the schedule for students to sign up for next year. So that again is a college prep math class. For those students who are majoring more in humanities in college and might not need that, they might want the 4th year of math, but not want to do pre-calc. Talking about the subcommittees, we have the math committee that Dr. Murray is working on forming. It's still going to be similar to the social studies committee, which is made up of people of the public and the admin and members of the board and the community. I'd say the social studies committee has been amazing. Dr. Mary's here. Yeah, it's really good. Everyone is very involved and engaged. So thank you to the community, all of you who are involved, because it's a lot of people. And it's really great, and it's great to get the input. And so something similar will be happening with math. We talked a little bit about learning technology, and that's going well, considering we're really being tested. We talked about the Linkit. We had, keep in mind, and we know the Linkit letter went home, and we talked about possibly tweaking that to make it a little clearer for parents. Just reminder to, especially the parents watching, that Linkit's more of a formative assessment. So it's assessing what they're learning throughout the year. So think of it as a in-process test to see what they've learned so far. And it's more to give data to see what areas, teachers might want to focus on that are weaker areas of the students, and some things they just haven't even gotten to in the curriculum. So again, it's more of a formative assessment and not meant to be a test where it's an achievement, not achievement test. And that's really it. Our next meeting is February 9th, and we now have Tom Vecchio joining the curriculum.
Yeah, so Jamie is chair of the curriculum committee. Big job. Thank you, Jamie, for taking that on, and thank you for the update. Any questions? What does formative assessment mean?
So think about it as inform, like you're forming, if you want to use like a mnemonic device. So
Yeah.
you're forming the learning. You're not done. So you're looking at it. It's kind of like when you go to the doctors and they measure you and weigh you to see how far you're growing, but you're not finished growing as a child. You're still developing.
Okay.
So you have a long curriculum. You haven't learned it all yet. So they are assessing you on all of the curriculum, even though you haven't learned it all yet.
Yeah.
But it gives you information for then what are you going to teach next, or what areas do you need to fill in that maybe they didn't get the first time around that you thought they did.
Okay. Just wanted to see if we knew that.
Did I pass?
All right. Welcome, Justin Benford is now our Finance Facility Committee. Jamie took over for Dave. Dave, thank you for doing that job before. Susan's not with us tonight, but she's done a good job of chairing that committee. Another important role. Justin, thank you for taking it on.
You're welcome.
Did you meet?
No, the first meeting with me as chair is on February 8th.
Okay, so we'll look forward to your update in February. All right, great.
You got it.
Thank you, Justin. Lynn, you are continuing because of the, not saying that anyone didn't do star job, but you're rocking it out as chair of the policy committee. So we kept you there and are appreciative. Can you give us an update?
Yeah, so we met last Thursday. As Chuck said, it was rather uneventful, which in these days I claim is a really good thing. Our committee stayed the same, so it's me and Heather and Adam and Dave, and is our policy coordinator. So we looked at, aside from the 5 policies that are on the agenda for a second meeting this month, all of those are pretty straightforward. We looked at 12 existing policies and regulations, only 2 of which we thought warranted further review. So we pulled policy 0131, which is regarding bylaws and policies, and really that one is it's just outdated. It talks only about paper format, and obviously so much of our stuff is now online these days. We just want to update it content. And also on policy 6163, which is deals with advertising on school property. So we just want to make sure we're following that as it's written and see if it needs any updates moving forward. And then we spoke briefly about 2 that we talked about before, the wellness policy. We'll get into that more in the spring. A progress report is due on that. And then the homework policy we haven't moved forward too much on that yet because of COVID and overlay, but there's some survey results that Gina's going to share with us next month. And that's all we're going to do.
Thank you, Lynn. Any questions?
It just might be good to share publicly, and I'm sorry, I can't remember, but Gina, you shared something during that meeting that I thought was really enlightening. Approximately how many hours of homework a night should someone expect with an accelerated or AP class versus a regular class? Does that change the amount of homework per night, or is that up for discussion? I thought that there were guidelines, kind of.
Well, there are very specific guidelines for kindergarten through 8th grade. Once you get into the advanced classes at the high school level, it's not as specific. I believe the metric we typically use is about 2 hours.
Well, for an AP course, the College Board will recommend up to 2 hours of homework for every hour in class. That's on the College Board website for an AP class, so that's
As the upper maximum.
as your
So in theory, if someone was taking 3 advanced accelerated AP classes,
Well-
and they said my kid's having 6 hours worth of homework every night, that's not unreasonable.
right. So the advanced accelerator are actually different than the AP.
Yeah.
So I would say if the AP is up to 2 hours, the advanced accelerator, we don't have a guaranteed metric on it, but probably an hour to 90 minutes, maybe. I don't know. We don't have that. But if you have 3 AP courses and you're getting 6 hours of homework a night, that's falling within what the College Board guidelines are for
Yeah.
homework. Now, technically, no, because it's 2 hours, an hour for every 2 hours, 2 hours for every hour in school. You're only in school for 45 minutes, so maybe it should be 90 minutes. We should look at that, drill down to that. That's the recommendation on the College Board website.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I just think it's good because sometimes, we don't ever want our students to be overwhelmed with too much homework, but
Right.
at the same time, if they have a very heavy course load, you have to have reasonable expectations.
Anything else for Lynn? Okay, Linda is not here tonight, and I think we're meeting next week, early next week.
Monday.
Monday. All right, so we'll have an update next week for that. Tom?
Yeah, committee, consistent with our agreement with the HEA for the last contract extension, the makeup of the committee stayed the same. We are planning to have an intro, a re-intro meeting of the respective teams, hopefully next week, just to get ourselves acquainted again since it's been so long, and then start the process in earnest this month, next month. And I'll be providing public updates and obviously exec session updates on the specifics of our negotiations.
Thanks, Tom. Any questions? All right. Gino, do you have a report for us?
I do. We'll speak briefly about some social emotional learning updates. Mr. Klaus, can you get the PowerPoint slide up?
Yep, right now.
Thank you. So just to summarize some things that have been happening over the past several weeks. One, we have solidified our school-based SEL teams. It's a 3-team member at each school. All 3 of the team members have been formally trained through Yale University, most of whom have completed their online coursework. All staff in the district have completed their online ruler training, which includes 2 2-hour learning modules about social emotional intelligence and understanding the ruler tools of emotional intelligence. Temple University's Child and Adolescent Anxiety Disorders Clinic is up and running and has been for the past 2 months. And just as a reminder that we have 2 graduate clinicians working in the school district 1 day per week. There are essentially 3 facets of the support they provide. 1, they can provide direct counseling support to students. 2, they can provide consultative services for staff. 3, they can assist with an expedited referral to Temple's Anxiety Clinic located in Philadelphia. Parents and teachers should know to contact their school counselor if they know of a student in need of these services. Thus far, the team has serviced 13 students. The survey of our guidance staff has thus far shown a 100% level of satisfaction with this new layer of support. So I'm very happy to see that this program is being utilized, and the feedback both from parents and from staff has been exceptional. During this school year, we've implemented a new employee assistance program. Just last evening, we completed a parent information session on helping to identify signs of anxiety in children and how to support children's mental health during this pandemic. And this event was really made possible through an NJEA grant that was successfully written by Stacy Brown Downa, who's a teacher of special education at the high school. Last night, we had 72 parents participate. We provided a post survey after the presentation. And so far, we only have 18 responses, but of the 18 responses, 80% of the parents were either satisfied or very satisfied with the content of the presentation. And again, this presentation was done by Dr. Philip Kendall, who is a world-renowned expert on dealing with child and adolescent anxiety, and he is the executive director of the Child and Adolescent Anxiety Disorder Clinic at Temple University. So we're really happy to have him on board supporting us. Dr. Kendall has also provided 6 hours of in-service training to our mental health staff in the school district. and is contracted for an additional 7 hours that will commence through the rest of the school year. An email was sent to all parents this afternoon, directing them to the recording of the session and slides. So again, last night's session was geared toward parents of students in grades preschool through 8. We recorded the webinar. It is now posted on the website, along with the slide deck that was presented. And the next session is geared toward parents of students in grades 9 through 12. That will happen on February 3rd at 7 p.m. Our first ruler student lessons will be implemented in grades preschool through 12 by February 18th. That's when that's the time by which the student lessons will be rolled out. And then with lessons extending through the end of the year. So now we're moving into the next phase of our SEL initiative, and that is teaching students the specific ruler skills. And at the elementary level, the elementary principals and the school-based ruler teams will be conducting a family night to educate parents about ruler and what it's about. And finally with that, the annual student and staff SEL survey will be re-administered in May. This is the same survey that was administered in November of 2019. That's where we gathered the baseline data. So now we'll be administered the same survey in May, which will be able to help us gauge the level of progress that we've made since we began this initiative.
What grades did that survey cover? Did that cover all the way down to elementary?
Third through 12. Yeah, and it consisted of 2 components. One was an SEL inventory that students took that helped to measure their levels of emotional intelligence. That's the survey that resulted in the individual reports that were sent home. And then the second part of the survey was more of a overall climate survey of the school. So those will both be re-administered to students in grades 3 through 12, as well as all faculty and staff.
I'm sure I'm stating the obvious, but before you even get those survey results back, obviously November 2019 is going to be very different than May 2021 after all of COVID.
Yeah.
So it's possible that, people may feel heightened anxiety, even though there's been a lot of wonderful things put into place. And it's also possible that some parents may not be as informed as they would have ordinarily, even though you're communicating, but they just may be overwhelmed and they may not be giving as much attention to the school communications possibly. I'm just throwing it out there in case you get results that are not necessarily what you might expect.
Yeah, that's definitely a variable that will be taken into consideration when we analyze that data. It would be naive to think that the current pandemic would not adversely affect that data.
How are you rolling out the SEL or the ruler training in the middle and the high school? I understand the elementary school is the same teacher, but what does it look like for the middle school and the
Yeah,
high
it's a
school?
great question. So at the elementary level, the lessons are going to be done by the classroom teachers. At the middle school, it will also be done by the classroom teachers, but during the advisory period. And then at the high school, they're doing it during extended homeworks. So what's really cool about this is the fact that these lessons are going to be instructed by classroom teachers. And a lot of times in the past, when you had these kind of lessons happening, it was always just the guidance counselor or maybe the social worker coming. But we are spreading this out throughout all of our staff and providing some in-service time and some other training opportunities to make sure that teachers are understand the lessons, are versed in the curriculum, and supported by the school-based SEL teams.
Timing couldn't be better for this, huh?
Yeah.
Given the pandemic.
Right about that.
Great timing.
Yeah. And there have been some great things I think we've been able to fall back on as a result of starting this initiative now a year and a half ago. So yeah, the timely this has been good.
All right, thanks, Gino. Chuck, you're gonna give us a quick update?
I got a couple of things. Yeah, first, we'll look at the senior trip. So we'll talk about that. Tammy's here in case we have some questions. our rationale behind our shifting to full virtual in the middle school and central school grade 5, and then a COVID update. So the senior trip usually takes place in between the winter and spring sports season. But for this year, obviously, it couldn't work there. So what many schools are doing, and we're looking at doing the same thing, is moving our senior trip to right before graduation, June 11th to the 14th. So you come back, you do your couple days of graduation practice, graduate, and move on. I actually think that'd be a good way to do it in the future, right? Rather than have it in mid-March, because it's always when you're working with high school seniors, they come back from the trip, and that's a checkout time for many of them. So it might be a better way to do that in the future. We do have the possibility that if quarantine to travel is still in place, then we would have to shift graduation back. These are difficult decisions to make because graduation is the culmination, that's the event, the culmination of your academic career here at Haddonfield. But this goes back to, if we can give the kids a win, when they've had so few of those right now, we try to put that in place. Remember, graduation didn't happen until July 20th last year. We still were able to have that happen. The challenge is this. Deposits are due February 1st. It's about $1,400. It's a little more expensive because there's only 2 to a room rather than 4 to a room. It's a day shorter than usual too, but we're given that piece. Payment is full, due is March 23rd, but you can get insurance in case the trip gets canceled. You would just lose out on insurance. And I believe certain fees by the travel agency that they can't get back. But there's challenges. And one is that our policy, I've done a policy, our practice has been that if you don't have 50% of the class going, we don't run a trip. That hasn't happened here in forever. We usually run about 85% of the kids go. You know, we think about 180 kids out of the 200 generally, which would be 90%. But this is different this year, right? And so you look at that decision and say, if it's 50-50, do we still go? Is it still a senior class trip if 40 kids are going out of 200? It's really not, right? This is about bonding and being with the class. So that's a number that's what we're going to use a gauge. Now, obviously, if it's one kid shy, we make that call at that point in time. But that's the number we're looking for. We would require mandatory COVID testing before you went away. There would be all kinds of policies about screening on every day, temperature checks every day, all of those things in place. But here's the real big challenge. If someone feels sick on a senior trip, they have to isolate, their roommate has to isolate, and parents have to drive to Florida and get them because you can't put a COVID symptomatic kid on a plane. And so that's something that parents would have to agree to ahead of time. So we're talking about 50%. Well, I may be all on board for my kid going to Florida for 3 days for the trip. Am I on board to drive down and pick them up if they get sick? And Rachel's been on a dozen trips. I've been on a dozen trips. Kids get sick on the trip. They're going the first day of the trip. You get here at school at 2:00 in the morning. You don't get to your hotel room until 11 o'clock that night. So it's literally a 20-hour day. Kids get tired. They get sick and they get cranky, right? So even the nature of the trip is a very rigorous event. But that's where, just give an update on that's where we're looking at right now. And we're going to try, Tammy's done a great job of trying to put this together with Lori Quinavali and Dan Doratone, the 2 senior class advisors. But that's the plan as it states right now, knowing that come March 23rd, with all these factors in place, the senior trip simply may not happen. But we're trying to give the opportunity. Another part of this is our senior prom usually is the Friday before graduation. This means the senior prom has to move to May 27th, which is actually the Thursday before Memorial Day weekend, because you have to get a Thursday night date at this late point in time. So there's a lot of dominoes that fall there. I guess we will expect the kids to be in school Friday the 28th after the prom, but I probably not. It would be silly to think that they're going to show off that morning. But that's the things in place. Tam, do you have anything you want to?
No, we did have a senior parent meeting for question and answers on Tuesday night. We had about 40 parents show up for it. At this time, and this is not unusual, but at this time we have about 20 deposits. The deposit's only $50. That's due by February 1st. So we have about 20 students that have put their deposit in. Again, that's not uncommon, they usually wait to the last minute, to do that. So that's kind of what we said to the parents, that for the 2 days we're looking at. February 1st, if we don't have enough initial interest, it might be a moot point. But also it's only a $50 deposit, so we did make it clear that by March 23rd, when the full payments due, if people back out, it may not move forward at that date either. One of the things that is a real negative is we really didn't have a big window to pick for a June date once we decided to move to June. And NJSL, ABC, put out after we booked the date that championships for spring sports are June 1st to June 20th. So there are seniors who are gonna have to decide possibly whether or not they go on their senior trip or if they participate in their spring sport. I know that's really hard, but every team in the Colonial Conference is doing their trip in June except for 3 that have already canceled. So it's just, really just not easy. And I told every single parent that I do not envy them this decision. I think some of them would like us to make it for them because no one wants to say, no, but every student, every family has their own unique circumstances during this time. And I have to assess that for it, So real quick question on the deposit. When you mentioned that $50 deposit, was that for prom or was that for the senior trip?
trip.
Oh, and that's all it is, and that's what they would lose if it got canceled, is
If
$50?
we cancel it by the 23rd, they'll get that back too. So there's really no risk.
Only after the 23rd that they would lose it. Got it.
Right, March 23rd, and then so we're also not advising them to buy the trip insurance until March 23rd, because that they would lose. So if they buy the trip insurance on February 1st and we end up not moving forward, they lose that. It's $61 for no fault or, insurance, so that they would lose, so we are advising them, just wait till the 23rd. By then, we should have a pretty good idea if we're going. We do have chaperones at this point who will go, but again, there are risks, and when we met with the COVID team, if a chaperone so the chaperones won't share a room, because God forbid if somebody gets sick, we don't wanna lose 2 chaperones, but you and your roommate are in it together, so and then we'll have to contact trace the best we can with when they were in the park, which we all have been to Disney probably, that will be extremely difficult. It would be self-reported, so that means a student would say, I was with these kids for over 10 minutes, within 6 feet. I don't know how accurate that would actually be. I have a question for, let's say that it does go on. When they come back and the quarantine out of state rules in effect, how does that impact potential graduation or any classes?
When we
if they're
sent
not
the
done?
information, we already gave them a second day for graduation. And I know some parents were not thrilled that graduation may be moved if they opt out of the senior trip and they're like, oh, and the graduation. But last year we surveyed all the seniors and they wanted to graduate together, more so than have parents there. So if we go forward with the senior trip, I said it on Tuesday night, and we still have to quarantine, we're moving the date so that this class can be together. We just have to be flexible during these times. We had a number of graduations last year, and so if we learn nothing, it's the flexibility piece. So that's kind of built in. We're hoping that maybe that quarantine is lifted by then, and we come back and everything's normal.
And they would be finished classes by the time they went.
Yes.
So we don't have to-
Then we would just not have graduation practice. We'll have to build our graduation practices after the quarantine.
And there's currently no requirement to quarantine when you get to Florida.
Right.
Any other questions?
Good luck.
Don't envy it. For unnecessary.
As somebody who's been on the trip it's a lot of fun for the kids. It's always hats off to the chaperones who go, because it is a grind, because you are working 24 hours a day for 5 days straight. It is, but it is a lot of fun. I have to admit.
It's like fun, like 4 days later when you think back on it.
I know I hear when I was teaching, and it's a lot.
So, as you know, we had 2 more shifts to full virtual recently. The first was the middle school, and we went shifted on January 11th, and we'll open it up on Monday back to the cohort model. This is the first time that, we've been saying from the start that staffing was going to be a concern. Staffing, we worry about leaves, we were about all those pieces. And this was a staffing, was a primary reason why we closed. There's other factors. You can see we had 4 positive students, we had 37 students quarantined, but we had 10 instructional staff members either positive or quarantined. There's about 50 staff members in the middle school. So you can see that runs about 20%. And you can't get a sub today, right? There's no substitute teachers. We have building subs that we've contracted out, but there's no way we could have guaranteed that for 14 days we could cover these pieces. We would be at least 7 physical bodies short to be in the building. One thing to clarify is, and the message was not clear, I guess, on my part going out. The staff's quarantine, the close contact was in school. So it wasn't like they went to Aruba and came back and had a quarantine. They were close contacts in school. And what happens is if we have people co-teaching in the same classroom, and one of those teachers is positive, then they tend to be teaching together. They tend to be a close contact. And then those teachers go teach with other people, right? And so it gets that web effect. So we put in since then notices like, please be very careful. Make sure you're staying 6 feet away from each other. I know it's challenging because of the nature of the job, co-teaching, but we really need to start doing that. And so that's what happened with our middle school closure. And because it was a teacher's close contact, they were quarantined for 14 days. That's why it was a longer period of time. We had to get those teachers through. You're going to see that when they come back Monday, I think in the entire middle school, there's 1 person or 2 people under quarantine in the entire middle school. So actually, even with the kids, it helped flush out that factor. Any questions about the middle school before I go to Central? Central School, this is something we would try to do earlier, and we've had some success with it. We just closed a grade. We didn't close Central School. The 5th grade that was closed, it was not January 1st, I'm sorry. It closed last week. It was only closed for 5 days. There were 9 students involved in it. So we had a pocket of, there's roughly 60 5th graders at Central School. There's 3 classroom teachers and then some support teachers who come in, special teachers. So in that group, we had 9 students involved. We had 1 positive student. We had symptomatic students also, so they were sent home. It was scary because we thought one of the symptomatic kids was a close contact with a positive, so that's a really big red flag for us there. We had 3 identified close contacts in school. 2 of the kids had exposures outside the school, and 1 kid had a positive in his house. So we had this pocket of these 9 kids in this group that all were intermixing that we felt it best to close it up. And because of when their exposures happened, they were able to open up on Monday too. Now, in addition, 3 staff members were quarantined. So you have classroom teachers in 5th grade, unlike pre-K to 4, the teachers rotate, right? So they see everyone. So when you don't have the teachers to rotate, it's not like if one teacher was there, they could stay with their class, right? So if there was one teacher that could stay with their class all day, like a 3rd grade, we might have only closed a section or 2. This is not the case. The teachers were not going to be able to be there to rotate through. So the ultimate side of this one was, as we decided to close the room, and Ms. Simkus instructionally, you're going to have subs in the room, the teachers teaching from home, whatever the percent of the class out. Instructionally makes more sense. You'll get a better delivery of product to actually go virtual in this case. So that's the reason why our 5th grade is Central closed. And once again, their last day is tomorrow, and they will be opening up again on Monday. Any questions on that? If you read the letters, and I'm sure you do, you notice case 112, we changed our language, and 111 times you put out, we don't believe it's contact was in school, and then we have this one that said, based on our current available information, it's probable this individual contracted the virus in school. Here's how this worked for our contact tracing. We had a student in school who was positive, okay? We had a close contact, right? That's close contact being positive. But the difference in this and other ones is when we talk to the parents about exposure, most of them say his sister had it, father had it. They have a place outside of school where they know there was an exposure. So even if we had 2 kids in the same class, positive, and they had family members who were positive, we assumed that the connection came from the family member. The second child in this case had no known exposure. It doesn't mean he definitely got it in school, But unlike those other cases, you can't rule it out because if we don't have a secondary known exposure. So that's how we came up looking at that one differently. That also explains, I know that people roll their eyes at not in school, that, yeah, okay, fine, you're saying that. But that's almost every case. The parent, when we're talking to them, says, well, we were with my brother and he's positive now. So usually it comes back to those. I would say 95% we know the origin, or at least we contact trace back to a point of origin. So that's why case 112 looked a little different in our books. The vaccine, as you all know, the vaccine is out. Teachers are classified as 1B, which means they can get the vaccine earlier than some others. Many teachers have already scheduled. So we know that the teachers are lining up. They are scheduling. We have decided to be very flexible with that, right? Because like Camden County College, if you sign up and you go down there, the last appointment is 3:30, right? So if a teacher gets a 2 o'clock appointment, we're not making them take a sick day or personal day. We're going to cover for them and let them go get it, because the good of the district is to have the teachers get the vaccination and encourage them to do so. So we're not going to be making teachers use any of their sick time or personal time to go get the vaccination. But we're going to help cover for them in the hopes that that's going to bring some things back. This is a big step moving forward to phase 2, right? I mean, this is a big step. Once our teachers, the majority of our teachers become vaccinated and can return to the buildings with larger numbers, this is really a good step forward and moving forward. It was a terrible sentence, by the way. Sorry about that. It was forward twice in the same, right next to each other. I think I saw yesterday that President Biden says that one of his goals in his first 100 days is to have schools open. And we'd like to be part of making that timeline. And that's really something we'd like to be able to say, we can do this in that time. And this vaccination is a big step forward in that.
Chuck?
Yes.
Related to the vaccination, and I honestly don't know how this is run in the schools. Do the teachers and the students, are they required to tell you, like other vaccinations, that they were vaccinated, or is it personal?
They are not in this case. The only shot records required, actually it's different for students and teachers. The only shot records required are the ones on the MMR and all those for the kids. Teachers only actually have to get a TB and have to sign off on hepatitis B. We don't take shot records from teachers. So they are different in that case.
So come next fall, you're not going to really know what percentage of the school or.
We will not. Unless something changes and they put something in the Department of Ed says we want to make sure that the schools are safe, and we're going to require you to tell the schools this information. One of the things is, everything's, challenging right now. This vaccine comes with some people are cautious with this, right? I mean, it came fast. It came faster than other vaccinations. And so there are some people who are taking pause at getting it. We respect that, right? That's something we respect. When they test it, and the other thing too is, even after you're vaccinated, you still have to wear a mask, you still have to social distance. When they tested it, we met with Dr. Nuwako today. We meet every week with the Department of Health. They tested it for effectiveness and they tested it for safety. They have not done any further testing on whether you can still be a carrier with the vaccine, right? They don't know that yet. So even though you may be vaccinated, you still have to wear your mask. You still have to quarantine if you're exposed. All those things are still in place until they know more about that. All right. And once again, our COVID numbers. Right now, we can see there's 119 total cases. That's actually 120. One came in about a half an hour ago. I haven't had a chance to add it to this. 18 active, I call them, in the last 14 days. 13 students, you can see they're broken up in high school, Central, Haddon, and Tatum. Middle school hasn't been in. I suspect, and I shouldn't say this because this is just pure speculation, if the kids aren't in school, the parents aren't telling us they're positive. Like, we didn't get a lot of cases over winter break. And I'm sure there were people who said, well, it's December 23rd, my child tested positive. He'll be cleared by the time it goes back to school. There's no need to tell anybody, right? So I think those things might have happened. So middle school's been out for 2 weeks, so that might be something that's happening there as well. And you see the staff, there's 2 members at the high school, 1 now at the middle school, 1 at Haddon, and a district-wide staff member. And the most recent case is another staff member too, the one that came through today. There's our quarantine numbers, and you see the middle school and central school. 125 represents the 5th grade going back too, so some of those are going to be in there. But you see the middle school right now, when they come back, there'll be 3 total quarantining because they've had that out. Monday, this last Monday coming back was a pretty significant day around here. I'm not sure if you know this. Monday, the 19th, for the first time in Camden County, like a dozen schools came to school for the first day. It was a big deal because for the first day, in a lot of schools, like Cherry Hill came back to school on Tuesday. That was their 7th day of school this year. Morristown had closed in early November. 7th, yes.
Wow.
Morristown had closed in early November, and they just opened up last week. There are schools. If you look at K-12 school districts in the area, very few have been in school. Well, almost none have been the entire time. Everyone's had small closures, but many of them are not opening until February 1st. So this is, you're starting to see this now. People's traction start coming back, and you can see that when schools were closing in November to avoid the Thanksgiving/winter break spikes. So they're feeling that's passing now, and they're coming back. And as I said, there are still schools that are not coming back until February 1st. And there are schools that have no plan to come back at this point in time too. Here's our positive numbers. If you look at the arcs, you can see the Thanksgiving spike, and then the post winter break spike, or the Thanksgiving spike, and now the post winter break spikes there. This is just staff and students, and this is by buildings. You can see the high school had the most at the beginning, but we're seeing more elementary cases now. Elementary cases tend to be family clusters, so you get one family, and they'll have 3 kids in elementary, and then it'll run through the whole family. So that's what we saw with a lot of our elementary people. I have no medical training, by the way, just so you know. Official. This is our Cali index, and the numbers to look at here are the big ones, are the percent positivity and the case rate, right? So they're the ones that are going to start getting us back toward yellow. And this is our current Cali data. So if you look at as of the 16th, which is Sunday, the case rate's 42.7, which is high, but it's actually coming down a little bit. They had that one spike there right last week. But the percent positivity is just over 10. 10 is the cutoff between orange and yellow in that. So that's coming down. By the way, the infection rate in Camden County is 0.98 right now, which is good. And the infection rate in our region is just over 1. So both of those are positive. It's interesting in that Salem County, which doesn't have a great population, their percent positivity, and they're part of our region. Their case rate was over 100 last week for one day, for a couple of days, because there's not that many people, so when people get it, so it's statistics, right? But this is the piece. Now, remember, we're in orange, and just today or yesterday, the Department of Health released another guidance for schools. They're updating our guidance continually, and we're in a high-risk orange. And this is where we are. These are the things we're following. These are the type of contact tracings they want us to do. So orange is a place where it's a place where it's scary a little bit still. You can see they even say consider implementing full remote learning, but it's considerate, so we're there. The other thing that's going to come out, this is actually what's going to be coming out, is about mixing cohorts is going to be something they're cautious about doing. But this is the piece. This is the orange one that caused a lot of I say angst. This is the exclusion rate. You can see when you're in orange, it's 14-day quarantining, even though the CDC says 10-day quarantining. The New Jersey Department of Health says 14 for this when we're in orange. When we drop the yellow, it'll go back down to 10 because that's what the guidelines say. So that's part of that. And as our numbers are starting to do, and I look at the numbers every day, between the vaccine And we're expecting the spike to come down. It is time that we're going to start talking about phase two again. We are going to start developing target dates for phase two. We can start talking about when we start bringing more people back. As a matter of fact, if you have an elementary school child, you got an email or notice today that students with IEPs are now coming in for both cohort days. So we're starting to bring back some of the population that way. Middle school and high school have already started doing that. So our students, or most vulnerable students at this time, are now getting in 4 days a week. So that's a phase we're going to walk in. We've already submitted our phase two plan to the county. So as soon as the numbers start coming down a little bit more, we're going to start looking at the target date. One thing that will happen is because our phase two is going to have both cohorts in this building together, the Department of Health will send a team out to look at our setup to make sure they think everything's okay, right? They're not, that's a riskier way of doing it than going full day cohorts. So we think we did all the numbers at the beginning there. But so the Department of Health will come visit us when we're getting ready to make that move and look at what we're doing, give us some advice, talk to us about what we're going to be doing, making sure everything makes sense, and moving from there. Any questions or comments about that?
Phase two is still not lunch.
Phase two is still not lunch.
Right.
Lunch is a challenge, right? Because you got to take your mask off, and we don't simply have space right now. Maybe in the spring, where we can spread out on fields, but right now we don't have space for kids to take their mask off and be 6 feet. As a matter of fact, we met with the Department of Health today. One of the big discussions was when you have to wear a mask in a school building, which is actually all the time. What if I'm in an office by myself? Put your mask on, shut. It's that's exactly what the doctor said today. Put your mask on when you're in school. So that makes it's really a challenge to eat lunch if the directive is you've got to be wearing your mask when you're in school.
Okay.
And it's only January, and obviously it's still a lot of unknowns, but I mean, you look out to next year, and we just said earlier, we're not going to know who's vaccinated, and even if you are vaccinated, there's this expectation that you're going to wear your mask. So, I don't really even have a question. I'm just kind of putting it out there that as you look forward, regardless of what additional information you get, you're still going to be presented with another challenge come the fall. And I don't know if there are any good answers yet, but I'm sure people are starting to get antsy. I've already had my kid in school for a year during this. I'm concerned that my kid isn't learning as much. And then next year, we're going to be faced with tough choices despite having these vaccines.
I agree. We've thought I've been wrong every time. I think that's almost happening with this, right? But I think we can get back in school, but it's still not going to be school like we want it to look like. Probably we'll still be sitting in desks and rows more than we want to be with our little guys, especially. We'll still have to take those precautions about things. I would imagine still wearing a mask in school. I think those things are going to stay in place for at least a little while beyond in the fall.
Good work. It could look differently. It could be like almost like a boiling pot where the vaccines are coming out, like if they really get the operation moving quickly, it could be a tip where all of a sudden the hospitalization rates are through the floor. There's, infection rates are down. You have this sort of herd immunity. Well, I don't want to, a bunch of Dr. Fauci's talking about, but what if it flips the other way? You know what I mean? Just like it turned on suddenly, like it was like this murmur, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, it blew up. What if you can put a lid on it? And I don't know that I don't know. I don't know that it can't shut down as quick. I'm trying to remain hopeful.
No, and I am hopeful too. And I think things will change in a very positive direction. I think there's still going to be tough decisions that need to be made around risk. And I hope we're in a position where we can say, you know what, we're going to make a decision that there's still some risk because we're not going to know everybody that's having a vaccination, but they're widely available. If you wanted, the opportunity to get one, you have the opportunity. We're going to require masks potentially, but we might actually be eating lunch in our schools at that time too.
Yeah, and when we talked about our phase two, which was a riskier option than the full day cohorts, that was one of the things I think I said is that the phase we're in now, our model right now, no one really had very few people had to make a hard choice. The people were going to stay home or they were not going to stay home. Our phase two people have to have evaluate that for the child and say, my kid's been in school, but I'm not comfortable with phase two. I'm going to keep my kid home. But our response to our initial survey, remember, we were going to try to go to phase two mid-December, if I recall correctly, when we were doing it, right? Was about 80% said they were good with it, which is not too far off from where we were at the beginning of the year. So
What was it percent? 80 or 80?
80, 0. I think it's,
Yeah,
Gino, it's about 80.
80%, yeah.
Yeah, another thing is if, and this is forward thinking, but if it becomes a factor of, we are thinking like, it will matter to us, the percentage of teachers who have been vaccinated because we figured out a lower exposure. We could always do a totally anonymous survey. If we just want to know percentage per building. I mean, that might help get us at least the data, because it really doesn't matter who got it. It's just
Right.
kind of the
Yeah,
percentage.
that's a good point.
So doing the anonymous survey might at least give us an idea of how much risk we're in.
Well, so, and 2 points. So the data from the survey is a little dated right now,
Oh, yeah.
but the actual behavior of the IEP students that are now being granted a choice to come 4 days, I'd love to hear in the next meeting, what percentage are taking advantage of that, because that would be telling, to where they're going. And also it's budget season. So if we want to dedicate as a district to having more reliable data to make informed decisions in the fall, maybe we should start talking about budgeting for testing and doing sampling and all the other things that we kind of left on the table when we were talking about this because everybody's armchair quarterback, right? But when I heard, 100 million doses by our first 100 days, that wasn't the part that excited me. It was the extra money going into home testing. And I didn't say home testing, I thought district testing, so that we don't have to rely on self-reporting. We don't have to wait for the thing. If we could come up with a budget to take control of the data that we need to make informed decisions, and that's in the testing space. So I'm not on finance, but I would almost recommend that you kind of look at.
Are you suggesting testing students?
Yeah, absolutely. In a sample, to do sample
Sample
testing, to
cases.
know that our buildings are healthy.
What along the lines of what Jamie was suggesting with respect to teachers, we just need the data. We don't need the.
Exactly right. Yeah, we just need the data,
Yeah.
but we have under our control a budget to pay for those types of testing kits so that we have the data to be comfortable to say we're still making the right decision.
So my initial thought, and I'm not necessarily against it, but I don't know. Nobody in my family has ever been tested because we've never shown symptoms. I don't want anybody to be forced to be tested if they have no symptoms. Like,
I have the same reaction, man. Once you start talking about testing, on a voluntary basis, I can see that forcing it. I see that making a lot of people uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I feel like the anonymity, if we're the ones giving the test, is gone.
Unless you're gonna run a PCR test, they're not very reliable. To really get the data that you want, you would have to.
Well, but to my point, it's if you don't have the money to even have the opportunity to have this chance, that we need to budget it before we even think about it.
Yeah, and just considering our options, I'm sure there's new stuff coming out all the time so maybe we earmark something.
Well, and the college, you think of kids going off to college, they're getting tested.
They are getting tested. I know at Drexel you have to get tested before.
Well, and this is where push comes to shove. If 80% of the parents want their students back in the building, and the state says that it's an appropriate response to ensure that, well, then you're uncomfortable now, but if it becomes, herd immunity, there's also herd pressure to say, hey, man, we want school 5 days a week. Sign up for the testing. And that's putting the cart before the horse. I think the money is needed in the budget discussion.
I also wonder how much the actual results, even if if there's data that these tests are widely available, we feel pretty confident that the shots, that the vaccines are widely available. They're out there, and if you believe that they're actually effective, then people are sort of assuming the risk, unless you think there's some ability for somebody that hasn't gotten vaccinated to go ahead and infect somebody that has gotten the vaccine. It doesn't want. I wouldn't want to be reckless about it. We don't probably have the data to make that kind of a decision. But as long as it starts to feel it's widely available, I start to feel myself a little more comfortable, especially if we get more data to see that. the next-
Oh, and I completely
Yeah,
agree, but the decisions, we have to have our budget done by the end of the next month, right? So, it's more of precaution for a plan. Hopefully, we can reallocate that money somewhere else.
Totally agree.
Because I agree with you. I think by the time that comes, the hopeful side of me says, yeah, no, we're gonna be a lot more settled, but as Chuck said, we've never been right.
I said, I could be right.
All right. I'll sign on to you.
Quick reminder, phase two, is that just 100% of the students for like
That's
4 hours?
combined cohorts in the morning, yes. So it'd be the schedule running now, the combined cohorts in the morning.
Is that 5 days or
It'll be
is they
4
still
days.
off Wednesday?
So we'll still have a virtual.
Still virtual Wednesday?
I think, I'm just curious, and I don't expect you to give the number, maybe look into it. Just, is it, I mean, one of the things that's sort of bothered me through this whole thing is that not just our children sit at home, we're just stagnating. All school districts are, but I can't, it's sort of a kudos to Chuck. What percentage of your time is spent on COVID?
I actually asked someone the other day, I said, I don't know what the superintendent does for a living. I've only been here since July, right? I imagine on the board next year, there's nothing else to do. You semi-retirement. It's more, Gino, it's more because he does all the notification and works with the nurses. But it's a good chunk of my day, several hours a day just on COVID.
Yeah. And Gino, you listen?
I would try to put it at about 85%.
Really?
Yeah.
And you know, that's also, I mean, as you talk about the resources of those things, you know, that's also, our nurses are nothing but this, right? So, yeah, but we're gonna ask them to come next week to honor them, just so you know, we're gonna ask our nurses to come to honor them. But that's also our administrators, that's also Sunday morning and Saturday night and those things. It's not, you know, I think the last 4 weeks, we've had meetings Sunday morning around 10 or 11 o'clock with 5 or 6 people going over all this information. So it's taxing.
Are we gonna have a designated survivor so that one of them is in here just in case?
I was going to joke and say, it's okay because you had the whole summer to prepare for it. The whole summer you were preparing for, I mean, do you remember how we were talking in August?
Yeah.
This is gonna be terrible. I completely, when we got to the holiday break, I said, this is amazing. I know it's not ideal, but the other thing, and Chuck and I have talked about this, because it's hard on parents and we just attest to it, but you do know, and we know it on our own families, but we hear it, and there are people who are vocal about how difficult it is, and they're vocal with Chuck, and Chuck, you know, he says, you know, we have more in school than most public, like almost all public schools in the region. So I mean, from an effort, I think when we're all said and done, we're going to do postmortems on this, and it's way too early to pat you on the back yet, but you're doing, Gino and all the administrators, you guys are doing.
Oh, thank you.
And I just think it's-
Team's
to
doing a
hear-
good job.
it's funny, you're presenting all this data that is just not even remotely in your wheelhouse.
No, it's not.
But
I've learned a lot about numbers these days. It's good.
I didn't mean to take up anything for anymore. Okay, luckily I don't have anything to report on, other than our, you know, new slate of committees for the new year, which we already went over. So I'm going to open it up to public comment. And then this is the first week we have written public comments came in that I'm going to read. So I'm going to read the comments to the public, and I get to use any inflection. It'll be fun. I'm going to do that after we take calls and ask Katie if you would like to, do you have Katie Quickens here? I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Did you come with a comment?
A couple questions.
Okay, so let me give the whole spiel, because one of the parts of my spiel is we don't take questions. I'm sorry, we do take it. We don't generally answer them in the meeting, and that's only because we want to do research and make sure we get the answers, you know, with integrity and correct. So what we're doing is, now that we have members of the public, members of the press, we're taking comments in the room first, then I'll call on the people on the phone. I use your last 2 digits of your phone number to identify you, ask you to *6 to mute your phone. The instructions are on the screen with the phone number and the PIN. We ask you to mute your phone with *6, and then unmute it when I call on you by phone number. And then also, we ask that by policy, our comments are limited to 3 minutes. You can get back in line and of course comment again, but we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And if you have a question, recognize that we're not necessarily going to be able to answer it on the wire. We don't. We take the question down, make sure that we get your answer for you, or if it's of public concern, we make sure we make the answers in data.
And they still give their name and address.
And before you do speak, we ask that you give your name and your street name, not necessarily the number of your house, just the name of the street that you live on. And 3 minutes, say that again?
No, the 3 minute time limits.
I think so.
Oh, you did.
So we'll start in the room. So Kate now, sorry. We have Kate Quick. You can tell us what street you're on and fire away. Yeah, speak loudly so we can hear you.
I'm Kate Wyatt. I live on Euclid Avenue. I'm a mom of a 2nd grader and kindergarten, so I'm very new to the school district still. I came with a question, and I don't expect it to be answered tonight, but what I'm trying to find out and establish is what are the parameters, what are the metrics, what are the numbers that we have to achieve to move to phase 2? Is it a certain case positivity rate? Is it a certain percentage of cases? Or is it a certain availability of the vaccine to the teachers? And I know that we can't require them to report it, but we can allow them not to report it. Along with that, I'm curious why when we're not in school, we've made so much of an effort to continue things like contact sports and indoor sports when we're not even in the classroom in like a real capacity right now. I'm trying to make some decisions about what to do going forward for next year, and if I better understood what the plan was, that would definitely help inform my decisions.
Thank you, Kate. They're good questions. Some of them we've touched on before, and I'll make sure we touch on them again. But yeah, that's very hard and really hard. Thank you. Let's see. Okay, no call-ins. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to close the public comment section.
Was there no written comment?
Oh my God, I just told you I was not reading. I'm going to delegate this, by the way. I just got them today. So Colin Shanahan, Lakeview Avenue, wrote, I will have a kindergartner in the 2021-22 school year. Will there be an extended day kindergarten program? Alphabet said that they only do the before school if we have AM kindergarten, or after school if we have PM kindergarten. So can we get in touch with Alphabet about finding an answer for Colin?
Yeah, Mike communicates with them, and he's busy today, so.
Yeah.
we'll make sure-
Yeah, so we'll make sure that it's, that we connect Alphabet with this person, and also make sure that people understand. I'm sure Alphabet.
We'll have to get that out, that'll be impactful to a lot of.
Yeah, no,
So
that's
we'll
gonna
make
be-
sure we'll find out what that plan is and what we can make happen.
Absolutely. Okay, Jessica, I'm gonna butcher your last name. Denstead from Birdwood, Jessica Denstead. We have been very pleased with the way the district has handled this difficult year. At this point, is the district still planning on moving to 5 half-days of instruction? If so, when? If not, why? Chuck kind of touched on that in his presentation. Thank you, Jessica. Tim Fitzpatrick from Washington Avenue wrote, we appreciate the timely communications about COVID-19. Please add the current number of active cases to the new case updates. This will help with our assessment of when we're comfortable making the switch from virtual to hybrid. Okay, good suggestion, Gina. Amanda Moon from Coles Mill Road wrote, many of the local private elementary schools have been open fully without COVID outbreaks. Are there any plans to increase the elementary students' time physically in our school? Again, Chuck touched on this a little bit tonight. Thank you, Amanda. Ken Schweiker wrote an article I read on, he's on Wayne Avenue, an article I read on NJ.com yesterday indicated that the number of schools in New Jersey with full in-person instruction rose on January 4th from 77 to 80. That's a very promising sign. When is Haddonfield going to join these schools which are balancing in-person instruction with precautions required due to COVID-19? Why can't we rise to the challenge and demonstrate to our school peers that we are the best school district in the state, not only in terms of academics, but also in terms of possessing and acting on the determination to create a safe learning and social interaction environment for our children, notwithstanding the existence of COVID-19. Given New Jersey's rollout of the vaccine and, as I understand it, the immunity many in our community have developed against COVID-19, this should be a much easier task today than posed last year. Our children need to return to school, full in-person instruction at school. In my opinion, and the opinion of many in our community with whom I have discussed this matter, including my ex-wife, a local doctor, the harms faced by our children as a result of virtual and our current hybrid model, when we are actually operating under this model, instruction outweigh the potential adverse effects of COVID-19. As such, I implore you to reopen our schools. Thank you for your consideration and attention to this common question and all the board has done so far. Thank you, Ken. Katie Morgan on Chestnut Street writes, it's my understanding that Murphy's executive order requires students to receive at least 4 hours of live instruction. I am an elementary school teacher in Evesham. We have been in person all year. When we went remote around the holidays, we were live full day. Our full remote teachers are live all day. Our hybrid teachers live stream all day. Why aren't our children receiving more live instruction? What is the plan for getting our children back in the classroom? Thank you, Kate. I have lots of questions posed and comments. We'll be delegated next time. I'm going to check to see if anybody called. No one. Okay. That closes public comment. I'm going to open the working session for our voting portion of next week's agenda. I'm going to see if does anyone have anything they need clarified or questions about A through G, which we will be voting on under governance. Okay, how about section 2, curriculum and special education? We have A through K. Any questions or comments about those?
I have a question on the tutor list.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, Chuck or Helen, I'm just wondering how someone gets on the list, if they are vetted, if I understand some, there's within the school district, but there are some, wondering how they're.
They apply, like we apply for a teaching job through our frontliner application system, AppleTrack. And then they have to submit their resume and all the credentials, and they're interviewed, and they get on the list.
Oh, so they have all been interviewed?
Yes. I believe they've all been interviewed. Everyone who went on the list last year, I know was interviewed.
Thank you.
And it's, okay, good, thanks. Section 2, A through K, any other questions, comments, discussion?
No, just real quick in general, it's a work session, right? We're not voting at the end of it.
Correct. That's why we don't read through it, it's just, you
Perfect.
can,
Full disclosure, and I don't know why, but I looked at this agenda on 3 separate times and none of my links were active, and I thought they were just gonna be active before next week, so I haven't seen a lot of the attachments.
I think they literally went live around like 3, because Lynn and I texted Lynn, and as I was on the phone, so it was
Right.
late for them.
I'll follow up and make sure that they're live.
Earlier, thanks.
All right. Personnel A through H. Any questions, comments, discussion, clarifications? Section 4, business and finance recommendations. A through K.
I do have a comment on G, the Haddonfield Educational Trust met on the 15th, I believe. And the final, there's a discussion meeting, a thoughtful period, and then a voting for awarding of the, I think so there were 3 awards, as you see on the budget. There were 7 submissions. 1 didn't fit the criteria. It's actually causing a review of our bylaws in the HET. It was for the new reconstituted evening program that's run that's separate from us, but was run, but it was from startup costs. So that's not part of the grant pool. So that wasn't. And then 2 others that were too specific to one school or one program, so there was an equity issue. And the only reason I mention that is for those that might see that Elizabeth Haddon was awarded something for math. That is for a pilot that has been proposed to spread to all of the schools. And just like any other thing, sometimes pilots start in one school and then they get spread. We asked for clarification. Chuck gave the clarification for that, so it was approved. So that was very interesting discussion. I do have one question on E. Chuck or Gino, could you kind of talk about, this is very vaguely worded, is a good way to put it. And instructional and related services was the trigger word for me. Could you talk about what that RFP is and if what staff, any current staff that might be impacted by that?
That would be Denovi.
Okay.
Stepping stones, we're putting out the RFP for those services, so support services to provide these.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could we just clarify the wording? Is there any specific reason it is worded that way?
Do you know why?
Because instructional related services are also what we call our like in-house special education. They offer related services. I don't know. I had a mild panic that this was them. I thought it was Denovi, but it wasn't worded that way.
Right, well, for example, something like behavioral consultation, that's a related service.
Yeah.
So, the instructional component, could be considered the clinical associates, the one-on-one instruction that's
Sure.
provided. And the related service is behavioral consultation that's provided. So, yes, related services, it's a broad umbrella. Transportation is related.
Sure. Okay, fair enough.
So it would not impact any of our staff.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for section 4? Comments? Implications of the switch? All right, section 5 is the minutes. Do you have the minutes for questions? Okay, items for future consideration. Heather?
So, I'm trying to remember when we reviewed Bancroft and what's going on there. Forgive me if you touched upon it in that meeting. I don't recall that, but what I'm curious about is I know that we were initially not happy with the tax deal that the commissioners had made with the developer. And I am particularly interested in knowing what the situation is with how those homes would be taxed, because obviously it'll affect our budget and any estimates on incoming students. So I don't know if you are able to give anything now, or if you can give it next week or at a future date.
Yeah, I actually did have a conversation with, I think Jeff Casco. It's, they are negotiating. They're negotiating with the developer, and it's a part of the whole plan. They just told me they're very clear about what our asks were. And our asks were that we get funded like we would get funded from any person that purchases the property in
So we just want fair, standard tax compensation, nothing less, nothing more. And however they would then work that out with the developer.
That's on merit, yes. And the pilot, whatever the pilot percentages are in the county, we just want to make sure that you know, the purchaser of the property is paying their regular rate to the school to chip in and be, you know, to help the community, you know, pay for children's education.
And do you recall, and it's okay if you don't, but how many additional students did we anticipate? And I realize they're gonna be spread out through kindergarten through 12, so it may not be that impactful on a particular grade, but I have a number in my head and I just don't know if that was a legitimate number or if I imagined it, so.
I know, we've had some discussions, there's so many numbers, it depends. They have talked about age restricted, they've talked about age targeted, which are two totally different, anticipation, with two totally different numbers. I don't wanna venture into what they're negotiating and guess what they're gonna finalize on, but,
Okay, I thought we couldn't do age restricted, but if that's still on the table, that changes.
I don't know. You know, there's no deal. I don't think they didn't finalize it, so I think that's a deal. Age targeted, I think, do you remember?
It's their age target. I thought they said third, but I don't think they, you know, the number is.
It's not, no, we have to. put-
Yeah, I don't think that even,
We looked at the
the
news.
planning board meeting for Bancroft is on Tuesday,
Yeah.
the 26th. So, but I don't think that it's that far along. that we-
And Susan's not on either. We looked at, what we did was Susan tried to look at statewide comps.
Yeah, Susan was one of the
Yeah,
other numbers.
So it was, you know, and we have to look at the worst case scenario. We look at bad case scenario, even if it's age targeted, and you have, you know, it's not that every grandparent can move in with a child, that's fully allowed, child and grandchild. So, it's not that, we have to anticipate some increase. And that we did talk about. The numbers were,
And one more jump back to the taxes. I know you said you communicated with the commissioners that that's what we want from taxes.
Yeah.
Did they agree to give it to us, or did they just say, thanks for sharing that, and we'll look into it?
yeah,
Well,
I
one's a
mean,
commitment and one's a non-committal.
they understood our asks specifically. They were very clear of understanding, and it was, I got the feeling that they understood the importance of the ask as to the community. There were no promises.
Do we have any update on the land swap?
The land swap, we are waiting for an easement, which allows the way I understand it, the borough needs to split to allow them to split the land, which is now in one parcel, into two parcels. They had to have an easement that has to be signed off by SHPO, which is the State Historic Preservation Committee, organization. And this is, my understanding is they need that finalized before they're allowed to split the land, and we're not asking for the whole piece, so we can't do the trade until that land has been split.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
I feel like that's been a while we've been waiting. Do we at least have an estimate on how long? Because it
yeah,
has been, I feel like that's.
Last I heard, it was by year end, so,
We're past it.
yeah, I mean, it's,
And the easement is for a driveway.
Right.
A driveway cutout in the curb on
yeah.
On Hopkins, right?
Hopkins.
Hopkins entrance.
We were gonna have a thing, which, I'm not very, I don't care if we have a thing. I mean, people know about it, where we could be extremely transparent. But we were gonna have a thing, and somehow the thing didn't happen last February because somebody had a conflict. And then the thing got put off till March. So it's, gonna be February, if we can get to February. We definitely wanna see it done. It's so fundamental, I mean, we all have discussed and agreed, it's fundamentally very good for the town. It locks Radnor Field up and puts Green Acre, Radnor Field is placed into the Green Acre registry, which means it can never be developed. And that's great for people that live around Haddonfield, because they don't want it developed into a housing project, which is an uncertainty. Board has never discussed doing it, it's not something that's gonna happen, but this locks that land up forever. So, and in locking that land up, the borough can receive funding from the Green Acre funds, which help reduce the debt that they took on to buy the land in the buy the parcel in the first place. We have no strategic need for Radnor, we've just held it, we've land banked it. We said to the borough, we want to land bank land adjacent to the high school, which makes, 10 times more sense to have that land than Radnor, if we ever need, far future expansion. Not to mention the fact that we can use it for parking and open space as soon as we can. So we'll get an immediate benefit. So, yeah.
And to a point Dave made earlier, it's frustrating that it's not happening, but it's important because we have a budget coming up.
Yeah.
And when we get that land, we're gonna have to do something, right? And we can't budget for something we don't own. We can't put our budget to send to the county and say, we're putting aside $200,000 to develop or take care of property that is not ours. So as we work on developing our budget and we have our capital expenses, it's gonna come into play there. We need the property, and we only have 6 weeks before our
That's
budget
what I
has to
was
go
thinking.
in, right?
We're
That's a big
gonna
deal.
literally be put on another year of hold if we don't.
Gonna need to let the commissioners know. I mean, they may not realize the urgency for us with that budget, and
They do. That's what I was talking to Jeff. I said, we really have to move on. They're sort of at the mercy of the state, whatever function has to happen on their end. But, yeah, it's a budget, and that's what I told them. It's a budget, we have to budget for we have a reserve fund for capital improvement that we're gonna take in Cooley, which we're happy with not using Cooley and having them tear down Cooley, but we have the carriage house and the greenhouse that we've all been through, were discussed, and that every month we don't acquire those properties, the cost of getting them to a usable state is going up. So it's hard. It's hard. The swap should just be easily, it should be moved forward, I agree, I can't say that. But thanks, good to bring it up. Any other questions about line swap while we're talking about? Okay, any other items for future consideration?
not really for the meeting, but if everybody can just hang out for 5 seconds afterwards, we can talk about maybe a group gift for Mike.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Any word?
Not yet.
Although he's been sending several emails to us all day about work-related things, despite Chuck and I imploring him to go binge watch something, or just spend time with
He
your wife.
needs
Stop working.
distraction.
Probably got kicked out already.
She's not really.
I can see him pacing.
He just misplayed his hand. Great, Heather. Thank you. Any motion to adjourn? David?
Second.
And Julie, we are adjourned. Thank you, Michael.